guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I'm going to be talking about the process of writing my dissertation, and this is going to be a two-part video. So part one, I'm going to talk about how it was for me writing my specific project, and then part two is going to be a more structured explanation of how you can write your qualitative research paper. So without wasting any time, let's get straight into it. So unlike my undergraduate project, which I talked about in one of my recent videos, I had a lot more liberty and options and choice in what to research this time around. And I also did qualitative research instead of quantitative research, which was kind of a breath of fresh air. It was actually quite nice considering how much I don't like numbers. This was really nice to do. Now, I will say that for this course, for counselling courses, I don't know if we're allowed to do quantitative research, but we were all, I think everybody on the cohort did qualitative. So just keep that in mind that when you get to your master's or your degree, you'll probably be expected to do a qualitative research piece. So how it started was towards the end of second year, we were told to kind of start thinking about what we wanted to research possibly, and to just keep it in mind and to, come up with ideas throughout the summer holiday. And at this time already, I'd already done a presentation on counselling in schools because that's where I did my first placement. So that kind of sparked a little bit of ideas in me that I wanted to research something around young people's mental health during COVID, because that was something that came up a lot in the placement when I was counselling some children there. So I already had kind of this idea. And as you know from my previous video, the whole thing of wanting to research love and domestic violence wasn't really on my mind anymore. I had kind of this other idea. And I also had another idea around religion, but I can't remember exactly what the question was. If I find it, I'll put it on the screen. But there were those kind of ideas floating around in my head. But as the summer holidays went on, and by the time we came back to uni in October, for third year, I'd already kind of decided that, okay, it was between researching young people's mental health during COVID, or it's going to be maybe about religion. So when we came back once a month, as I explained in my previous video, we had meetings with our supervisors as a group to research where we were at, how we were doing, and kind of ask any questions and, go through the process of deciding a question and kind of seeing and doing our own research as well to be like, is this a suitable question? Where's the gap in the research, and so on and so forth. So in our meetings with our supervisors, there was a lot of things to think about. So presenting ideas that you had initially, and then, your supervisor and the group would kind of chip in and ask questions that will help you think further about what you wanted to do. So once I kind of had decided that I wanted to research young people's mental health during COVID, there was a lot of questions like, okay, what age specifically? Because then I wanted to understand, I wanted them to be a specific age during COVID. And what was the gap in research? What question am I going to ask? What are the interview questions going to be like? And, thinking about safeguarding, because I wanted to interview people that were younger. So there was a lot of things to kind of think about throughout the process. And all this was done with the help of my supervisor. And originally for my research, I'd wanted to interview kids that were aged 16 to 18 or something like that, because during the pandemic, then they would have been at least 13 or maybe even 12. So that was something that I wanted to look into what their experience was like. But I had to then change that because, something my supervisor made me think about was safeguarding. I would have to ask parents' permission, schools' permission, and go through so many loopholes to kind of get the participants I wanted for the study. So she suggested, okay, how about first year uni students? They'll be 18 and it'll be simple. You won't have to ask anybody's permission. It'll just be them. They have to be the ones to consent. It'll be a lot more straightforward. So I went for that because even then, during the pandemic, they would have been 14, 15 years old. Some of them were even 13, turning 14. So I still had a good kind of age range to work with to answer the question that I wanted to. I also read a lot of papers so that I could see where the gap in research was. This would help me to refine my research question. So this is something that you'll probably have to do as well when you're coming up with your question. Read a lot of other research papers, see what's already out there so that you're not replicating what's already out there, which there is no problem with that. But something to make your dissertation stand out is just thinking outside the box and being okay, what can my research add to what's already out there, what's already known? And also at master's level, I didn't know this, but you could also get your research paper published if it's of a good enough standard. So that's also something to keep in mind. So after a lot of refining and researching, my final research question was exploring 18-year-olds' personal experience of mental health support during and after COVID-19. So once I decided this question, then I had to start coming up with interview questions, and we were suggested that we should do maybe between 2 to 9 questions, and I'll have them on the screen. And the interviews that we did were semi-structured. They had to be 40 to 60 minutes long. Even if you went over a little bit, it was okay, but they advised against it because we're the ones who have to do the transcribing. And if you've ever done transcribing transcribing before, it's not fun. It's tedious and it's a long process. And we also needed at least 3 to 5 participants. Anything more would have been too much. So most people had 3 or 4. I had 4, which I was really happy with because I feel like that gave me like a good substantial amount of information to work with for my results section. After all of this, at some point I did feel like I was falling behind because it seemed like other people in the group were like so much further ahead and they were like doing more. But you know, each to their own. I still was able to submit my dissertation even though it wasn't on the first deadline. But after all of this, next thing we had to do our ethics application, which was due on the 6th of December. And if you've watched my previous video, you know a bit more about the process and how that was. So the ethics application was basically a proposal for your research, what it was, how you're going to do it, all the different procedures from like data protection, confidentiality, your advertising, all of this kind of stuff, and any kind of documents that were needed. It was all in that one form. And then you had to then submit that to a supervisor who would then have a look through. So I did submit mine to my supervisor and she just told me to refine and fix a few things in there, and then I could begin looking for participants and advertising my research study. Once I made the changes that she requested, I was then able to start putting my poster out there. So I put my poster on different social media platforms and luckily had 4 people reach out to me. And you know, all the interviews were done online via Google Meet, I believe, and I was audio recording them. Of course, everything was consented to and all the participants knew. So the interviews were varied in different times. I'll have a screenshot on the screen of like when the interviews were and how long they were. You can see for yourself. And I honestly thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed the interviews and it got better with each interview, and it was just really interesting to kind of find out what I did from it. And unlike my undergrad, this was actually something I found interesting and I enjoyed, so it was a lot easier in that sense. So the interviews were on the 16th of March, 29th of April, 11th of May, and 20th of May, and then I was done. This left me with 1 month to write my dissertation because the dissertation was due on the 27th of June. So it was quite stressful, it was quite busy, didn't have as much time as I wanted. But of course, everything about what happened around my dissertation is in my previous video, so you can watch that and it will be in the description box as well. So after each interview, I started transcribing them bit by bit as much as I could. And then I was also reading books. I went to the library, got myself a few books to help me understand a few things about how to write a qualitative research paper, how to do thematic analysis and stuff like that. Well, before I started writing my dissertation, I kind of gave myself a timetable. So I wrote down how many words in each section and how many words I'd need to write each day to be able to meet my deadline. My deadline that I'd set for myself was a few days before my birthday, but I didn't meet it, and all the reasons why are in my previous video. But I wasn't able to keep up with my deadline for those reasons. I asked for a 5-day extension and I was still able to then submit my dissertation eventually. Also, for transcribing all the interviews, there was a transcription tool that one of my colleagues on the course showed me, which was really nice and it helps. Of course, it's AI, so it doesn't pick up absolutely everything perfectly, but it helps to make things a lot easier than transcribing from scratch completely. So that was really, really helpful. And I'll have like a screenshot of it on the screen as well to show you guys where you can find it. And the method of research that I used was, like I mentioned, thematic analysis. There was a few other options that we had as well, phenomenological analysis and grounded theory, but those ones are a bit more complex, so most of us use thematic analysis. So I went to the library, picked up some books to help me understand thematic analysis, and all that to prepare for writing a qualitative research paper. For our dissertation, our word count was actually 8,000 and it was reduced from 10,000 like a few years ago. So it was 8,000 words plus or minus 10%. And at first, of course, the word count feels really, really overwhelming. But once I started to write, I think I went over by like a few thousand words and I had to cut down immensely because it was a bit too much and it would have been very noticeable. I think by the time I submitted, I was still over by a few hundred words, but I could not care less because, as you guys know from my previous video, like I was just over it and I was like, I just need to submit something. So I couldn't give any more than I did. So this paper is not published, so I don't think I can post it anywhere online. Otherwise, I would have been really happy to share it with you guys, but I don't think I can. However, I did send it to the participants because they were allowed access to it. So I gave it to the participants to have a look through. But yeah, it's unpublished, so I don't think I can post it online. But overall, it took me 10 months from October to June to have this paper written and submitted, everything in between, and with only about 1 month of writing. It was not easy for me at all, I can't lie, especially towards the end. It was really, really difficult. Like I really had to push myself. I had done an all-nighter. I'd been awake for more than 24 hours to be able to write it. I was so exhausted by the time it was done. And yeah, it was just a lot. But I think if you plan well ahead of time, and of course life happens, but if you're able to plan ahead, start as soon as you can and just get things rolling as quickly as you can. So as I said, in the next part of this video, I'll do a more structured breakdown of the different parts of writing your dissertation and how you can prepare to write your own qualitative research paper as well. So don't forget to switch on your notifications so you know when that video is out, and I will see you in that video. Bye!